Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
And welcome to our Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 4 reaction and review. Now, you can say many things about Yellowjackets. You could be frustrated about some storylines in the present.
Yep.
You could be upset that Coach Ben may be getting killed off or maybe not because you hate Coach Ben. You can never accuse the show of not taking things just like too slowly because this was crazy at the end of this episode.
Yes, this show is not afraid to take huge swings for whatever reason. We all heard sort of the rumors of what was going on with Juliette Lewis, that she wanted to leave the show allegedly, and so they had to kill off her character. It doesn't matter why they killed off her character. It was a huge swing to do that. They could have picked another number of reasons why she wasn't on the show anymore if all of that was true.
Yeah.
Here, now we've lost Lottie, and it's in the middle of the season, basically, here, that they just decided that they're going to take out a major character in the show. It always feels like to me that we are going to lose all the Yellowjackets except maybe one, whoever the queen is, by the end of the whole entire series. That every season we're going to lose a Yellowjacket or two, and that's kind of the way it's going to go. But I did not expect it to be here. I expected it to be nearer to the end, not episode 4.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Like, we did a video earlier this season talking about who could die this season, and we did talk about Lottie, but I don't think either one of us were like, Lottie's gonna go in episode 4.
No, it's shocking.
Yeah, like, she was barely even in this episode. Like, we saw her doing her apology tour in front of the mirror, and then we didn't really see her that much again until the end of the episode, which made me kind of sit back and be like, did I miss something? Did I just have a brain fart like 30 minutes in the episode and there's a whole scene I didn't remember?
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there kind of wondering when she was doing her apology tour to really figure that out. Who was that apology for? Was it only to Shauna or was it to everybody? Because the biggest question now is, who did this? Who is behind actually killing Lottie? Because it feels to me like they're very obviously setting it up that it's Ty, that, you know, we had the whole story in the present, what went on with her and Van following that guy and the queen. And then she was like, I'll see you in an hour. And now all of a sudden Lottie's dead, right? But is it going to be that obvious?
That's the thing. And I think this show loves to play around with this idea because it could be that obvious, because it could raise yet again the idea of, okay, was this Ty actually acting on her own accord, or was this her being influenced by the man with no eyes again? Is something going on there?
Or is it just because of pure love at this point? You know, what are you willing to do for love? We're covering Severance here at the channel. We've been talking a lot about that same theme over there. What are you willing to do to see the person that you love for longer, to ever see them again, to be able to be reunited with them? Everything is starting to move in a more positive direction for Van, but it seems like Ty really feels like unless we keep offering up sacrifices to the wilderness, it's going to end up coming back. And then we've got Lottie, who has died, and candles up the stairs. I'm kind of like, is somebody setting it up to look like her? Or is she like, you know what? Lottie was doing us dirty, so now I'm just going to be like, I don't think Van will feel bad about this.
I think there are many possibilities we have to look at in this video, and we're going to do that. Before we do, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because we have so much Yellowjacket stuff coming this season. A lot more reviews, a lot more theories. We had one about Jackie's necklace earlier this week. And also, we want to get to 70,000 subscribers in honor of Jess's 50th birthday. And it is this really great celebration today on Friday, because it's officially Friday when we're posting this. So happy birthday. Let's party and discuss Yellowjackets.
Yeah, it's been really great. We've really appreciated everybody that is helping us get to 70,000. We are so close to 70,000 subscribers. So thank you so much. And if you do want to support us further, you can join our Patreon. We'll have a link for you below in the description. We're covering over there right now exclusively. It's the only place you can get these weekly videos. The Pit, which is airing on Max, and Prime Target, which is airing on Apple TV Plus. Both really great shows that we're having a lot of fun with. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. We really, really appreciate that.
Okay, so who killed Lottie? Who do you think?
Okay. I think you have a lot of compelling evidence that you've laid out there in regards to Ty. I think
Might be.
Ty is the most likely. However, I'm going to throw, once again, Hillary Swank out here, as I have done for almost every theory so far this season.
Where are you, my girl?
Yeah, it's just because you guys have clearly introduced her in some way behind the scenes. We know that she's coming. We know that there's this mysterious force that has been sort of in the undercurrent of this season for a while now, dating back to the envelope that Callie got, dating back to the phone in the bathroom. Like, there's so many different little clues, and there certainly are clues out there that's like, okay, the leading theory is that she's playing present day Melissa. And if she's playing present day Melissa, we're already seeing in the past that she was really trying to empower Shauna, and we'll get more into that a little bit later. But
she is really into power.
Yeah, she might have been so into power that she caused some sort of really huge divide, went completely berserk out in the wilderness, and everybody was just like, okay, no, we're cutting all ties with you. We don't want anything to do with you. We never want to see you again. And she might just now be at a point in her life where she's really ready to get vengeance. And Lottie in particular might be someone she wants a lot of vengeance on, because so many of the people in the wilderness are out there adopting this idea of, we're willing to give ourselves to these mysterious forces, rather than Shauna, who is the person who Melissa clearly seemed to care about the most.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at that jury scene where we're looking at who killed Lottie at this point, because there definitely is a power struggle going on. We have Natalie, who was, chosen to be the leader of the group. Shauna, who feels like she should have been the leader of the group. And Melissa, who's gassing her up to be like, yeah, look at the power you have, sort of thing, when she's really, the jury is not all together. They don't have the votes. And she's forcing the vote to happen. It's only when she's able to really push Lottie, who also has a lot of power, that then you see two other people be like, okay, well, if Lottie's there, then we're with Lottie. There are definitely a divide there.
Yes.
And if it is, say, Melissa in the present, because I think there is more Yellowjackets that have made it back. Melissa, I do think that Coach Ben's going to make it through. I feel like there's just other people in the present that we haven't seen yet. And it could be some sort of a power revenge tour of the people who were in power. And if it is something along those lines where maybe at some point Melissa had a falling out with Shauna back then, she was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm going to be the one that's going to have the power. Maybe now that's what's happening here. We've got Shauna in the freezer. We've got Lottie, who is gone. I mean, what is kind of going on here? The breaks, which was probably just an accident, but you know what I mean?
There are so many things going on here. And I think there's a lot of inevitable questions that are going to come in terms of, okay, is somebody watching them? Is it supernatural? Is it fate? Is somebody potentially framing Ty? Like, that's something I did think about, but at the same time, that would be really difficult, because they would have to know that Ty is in the vicinity, that they would be able to pull this off. And there's just a lot of different things that are going on there. Like, how I think it might be sold is that they're going to act like, okay, maybe Lottie just had a really hard fall or something like that happened. But this is clearly something that's going to be investigated to the point where it's already on Citizen Detective Misty Quigley's website, where she can look at it a little bit.
Okay, let's talk about the two other suspects then, because it is Misty, who's been missing for a couple hours, and Walter, who is just missing in action entirely at this point. Both of them had their falling out over Misty's friends, but Misty has now also had just a straight falling out with Shauna. She's in grief right now with everything that happened with Natalie. She's burned up the picture. She's done with the friend group. Nobody's apologizing for what they've done. It is absolutely possible that Misty is on a revenge tour. Absolutely, I believe that she can be. We know what she's capable of. Yes. But it's also possible that Walter still feels like he's doing Misty's bidding for her, that he's helping her. He's been trying to push with her. Listen, your friends, they're not your friends. They treat you like trash. Like, I am here for you. And even though he got thrown out, he's just gonna be like, you know what? I'm going to show you. I'm just going to take these people off the board. They're not going to be a distraction anymore. You'll end up coming back to me and it'll all work out. Walter is on the board.
He is on the board. We can't rule him out. I will say, as somebody who loves murder mysteries, and we sure cover plenty of them here at the channel, I am very excited about the idea that we do have a murder mystery to talk about over these next few weeks. And I'll be okay if we don't get an answer to this in the near future. Like, I hope we have one, obviously, by the finale. I don't want this to linger for too long, but an episode or two, that part of it is fine. Now, if we're going to look at this from a little bit of a meta point of view here, it was announced a while back that Simone Kessel, who plays adult Lottie, that she had been cast in something else. I will admit, one, I totally forgot about this for about a good several months. And two, even if I had remembered going into this episode, I would have been like, oh, okay, you know what? She can probably film all of her scenes in Yellowjackets and just like, I don't know, several weeks. It's like Nicole Kidman and Lioness, where they just throw her in a room and have her talk about problems, and then she goes and does 20 other things. But clearly, that should have been a sign that she was not long for this world. But I don't think we need Lottie's presence in the present, because we already have everyone else who has sort of adopted some of her teachings and believes in some of these like weird supernatural things that her character, I'm not saying it was bad, but I do think it's a little bit redundant to everything else that the show has going on now.
Besides Ty and Van, it feels like everyone in the present is kind of a rudderless boat. Like, there doesn't feel like there's like a structured story going on here. Even with Lottie, where she got out, came to the house, she's braiding Callie's hair. We don't know what happened in that conversation. I think that's the most important part of why Lottie was back. But then it was kind of like, okay, now she's gone. She's at the bank doing some banking. Now she's like, oh, I'm going to apologize. I'm like, what are they doing with this character? Like, her character doesn't have a story right now. So as much as I enjoyed her last season, she did need to go this season, or they needed to figure out what to do with her. Kind of like what's going on with Shauna. Like, I enjoy the humor of this show so much. So the idea that we've got Jeff and Shauna going to the hospital and doing volunteer work to get back good karma, and you know, he's doing the bingo and she's locked in the freezer having this moment with Jackie. All of it is entertaining, but none of it is going anywhere.
Well, that is the thing. It's like, yeah, I would love to hang out with Jeff and do bingo night with Jeff. Like, that seems like a good time. I'm a big Jeff fan, but at the same time, that feels like something you do in life, not something you do when you're watching a television show that typically has a runtime and a plot and these things that have to be hit. Like, the only thing that I'm going to kind of speculate a little bit about here in terms of what could be interesting for Shauna moving forward is, you know, Callie's going to end up learning about this, I'm sure, in one way or another. And is she going to go completely off the deep end and think that Shauna has something to do with this because of all the time that they were spending together? Because that would be a pretty good source of drama, to say the least.
Yes, I feel like they are setting up something really good with Callie now that Lottie is gone, Shauna will be a suspect because they had this huge falling out. Callie, I think, knows everything at this point. That's been my tinfoil hat theory. Lottie just told her everything. It was basically like, you're one of us now. Here's Jackie's necklace. Welcome to the group, kind of thing. So I think that Callie's got all the secrets of everything they did. And now this has happened with Shauna. And now she's going to be suspecting that Shauna had something to do with this.
And it's a real tricky thing, too, this idea of, okay, Shauna, a lot of the other present day Yellowjackets, they have all kind of moved forward with this philosophy of, we don't want everybody to know what really happened out there. But now you have somebody who does know what happened out there, presumably. And somebody who is young and rebellious and may have an axe to grind at a certain point. And if you're Shauna, you don't want to be going through this with your own daughter. It's just like, that is a really big problem.
Yeah, it is.
All right, one last thing here on the present before we move back into the past and the trial of Coach Ben is just, and we talked a little bit about this with possibly Melissa earlier, if Melissa is responsible for all of this, where has she been? Like, what has she been doing? Because you can't just be like, oh, she was institutionalized. So you already did that with Lottie. So I'm very confused about, regardless of if she killed Lottie or not, it's just like, why is she coming back now? And why was she not around at any point in the first two seasons? It's really bothering me.
She's the Brian Moser of this show, like over on original Dexter, which aired years back. So spoiler for Dexter, if you haven't watched Dexter. Brian Moser was his brother and watched him for like 15 years, like just watched him, studied him, tried to figure out the right time that it was to be able to come back into his life and cause some problems or reunite with everyone. And we saw her acting very strange in the past, where she is very much like a sycophant of Shauna. Anything you want. Yeah, you're the one. You should have been the leader. Look at the power you have. I'm just like, where is this coming from? Like, it's so much. You're taking it to an 11. It doesn't need to be there. But if that's the case when she was that age, by the time she's now this age, she may have just been watching them for a very long time and is like, okay, I'm going to gather as much information as I can, and I'll strike when I'm ready.
That's very, very patient. I mean, there are people who are that patient for sure. I'm not that patient. I will say that. It's sort of like...
Well, you're also not killing Lottie.
That is true. That is the big distinct difference. Okay, let's jump back now into the past and get into the trial of Coach Ben Scott.
Beep, boop, boop, bop, bop, boop. Okay, we're in the past.
Okay, this was really well done to me. Like, I thought this was very intense, well written. And this is where I get frustrated with Yellowjackets sometimes, where I feel like they've put a lot of energy and a lot of ideas into this whole trial, which admittedly, because we're dealing with this weird, surrealistic world where these people are out there and it causes you to suspend your disbelief here and there. Like, it could have been a little bit corny, but I don't think it was corny at all. I think the speeches were really emotional. I think the characters all stood out. And I really liked the idea that, okay, despite all of this suspicion that Ben may have done this, he still had people writing for him. And I think that was there was a tenderness there that I didn't expect.
This really cemented it for me that he did not do this. Like, it really feels like he didn't. I felt pretty confident that he did, since he was sitting outside the cabin and it felt like maybe he had done it. We never actually saw him like light the match or whatever, but it felt like the show obviously really wanted us to believe it, and enough that also all the girls believe it as well, right?
Yeah.
But his time sitting, you know, on the stand, we'll call it, and really explaining that he felt shame and, you know, fear and all these different emotions that really got through him, where he was just like, man, Shauna, what I did to you was shameful. It was what my parents would have done to me and something I never wanted to do to someone else. And here I am doing it to you. I am really sorry. I was like, whoa, this apology is very, very real. And I understand why Shauna didn't take it. It's what she went through was so traumatic. That's like, I'm sorry. Okay, cool. You might be sorry, but that doesn't change what happened. That doesn't change what I went through. It doesn't change that you were the only adult here and I needed you and you left. She doesn't have to accept that apology, and that's okay for her not to accept it. But to get to this point where you're like, I don't accept your apology, and I'm going to make sure that you get punished for something that you probably didn't do. Her anger is just clouding everything at this point. I don't think for her it is about power. I think for her it is about just revenge. You left me, now this is going to happen to you.
Yeah, and I don't think Melissa understands that level of nuance that's going on here, where Shauna's got a different motive than whatever she thinks Shauna's motive is. But the monologue itself, like, I'll say this is the best performance I've ever seen from that actor who plays Ben. I think that was really, really well done. It was emotional, but I think it's important to what the show, I think, is trying to project in that scene, where it's, whether it's your coach, whether it's your parent, your teacher, whenever you have like this adult mentor figure, you always sort of project on them that they are some superhero, that they're not human, that this is what Coach Ben always wanted. And to hear him sit there and be like, no, I didn't want this. This is not a job I was really excited about. I sort of fell into it and I ended up growing to love it. It's just like, that's a very human thing. And I think that's why the vote ends up, at least at first, being as deadlocked as it was, because I think for the first time, some of the Yellowjackets started to not see him as this parental mentor figure that they felt really betrayed by, and rather as just this really vulnerable person who had a tough upbringing and who left out of fear and had all these different motivations. So they started to see themselves and him, because they all have these fears. They all understand what they're doing out there is really, really brutal. And this brings us into those questions about Shauna again, where vengeance, like you said, I think is the big grade A motivator here. But it also is this interesting question of what does she really think about the fire? Like, she may know very well that Coach Ben probably didn't do this, but she just wants to punish him anyway. And that's a really dark and twisted thing that just makes me very, very worried about the next few episodes.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels very clear after the way he was talking in this monologue that he really did grow to care and love them, where he was just like, hey, you guys don't know, but like, I covered for you guys where you were all drinking, you all had food poisoning, or, you know, I caught you guys making out, I saw it and I told nobody. Like, I've long been riding for you guys, whether you saw me doing it or not, because we're all the underdogs, which I feel like a lot of people that watch the show, us included, we're all part of that underdog group. And it's, you know, we want to root for the underdogs, and so does he. And he wanted to protect them, and he did. And he's kind of like, why would I go through all that to then come out here and do this? You know, he could have done that to Mari, and he did, and he helped her. There are so much evidence that he didn't do this that they just can't seem to really, you know, get behind it.
It leaves us in this really difficult place now, because Shauna has basically forced a lot of these people into accepting her idea of quote unquote justice, because I think there is this, they were all probably getting tired of the trial going so long. She might have convinced some of them. There's a lot roped into that. But if we are to view this as a typical court case, and I'm not sure we should, but we have gotten to the verdict now. And then this brings us to the inevitable sentencing where, okay, you've decided that he is guilty. So what are you going to do with him?
Yeah. What is the actual sentence? He's just going to sit in the duck pen for the rest of his life? Like, what happens to him? And we did see that piece of, we'll call it birch parchment or whatever that Travis had that was kind of like, this was already sort of the outcome of how it was going to be. And it looked like Ben is sitting on a slab. So it's like, okay, but this is where it's going to get really interesting of, has the wilderness already chosen what the fate is going to be, and he is going to end up sacrificing on a slab, or are they able to sort of change it, and that's actually going to be somebody else that ends up on the slab, almost, you know, like a switcheroo. That's like, okay, you let him live, well, somebody still has to end up on the slab. So who is it?
I think the show is most interesting when they find a way to constantly twist and turn things around. So the idea to me that it's not Coach Ben would be more exciting. I mean, I would hate to lose one of the other characters, but at the same time, there are multiple Yellowjackets who are not accounted for in the present. Somebody's got to go at some point.
Okay, so my tinfoil hat is that the person that is going to end up on the slab is not going to be Coach. I think whoever ends up actually starting the fire, whether it's one of the Yellowjackets that are there, whether it's somebody else, we'll call them the others, like on Lost, that happen to be out in the wilderness there. I don't think that they're alone. I don't think any of us think that they are alone. I mean, there's kind of been enough evidence that at least somebody was there at some point, whether they're still alive or not. I mean, who put that box in the ground? It wasn't any of them, right, with all the supplies. So somebody was either there at some point or is still wandering around in the woods now as well, right? I just think that if it happens to be one of the Yellowjackets or it happens to be somebody else, that's going to come to the surface before Ben ends up on that slab, and that they will be the person that ends up on the slab.
I like that a lot because it gives me an alternative explanation to what was going on in my head. Because
okay, what do you got?
Well, even before this video, you've kind of convinced me, because before this video, I was really feeling like, okay, we probably are going to lose Coach Ben. And
we very well might, and then they find out that it's not him, and then they all have to live in the guilt.
Well, that's the reason why I thought it was like, okay, we're probably going to lose him because something really bad here obviously happens, because it's one of the many things they don't want to talk about. But the idea that you lined out there is really interesting in its own right, because let's just sort of project some things here. Because if you've watched the past videos, then you know, or you've heard me talk about the Jason Ritter mystery, where this actor was cast for a bonus episode that is still not aired and nobody knows what in the world is going on there. And I kind of feel like Jason Ritter was probably the character who had that cabin before the Yellowjackets showed up. He's probably still out there. So if we are to sort of combine our powers Captain Planet style here, then I'm going to say that he might be the person you're talking about here who they end up finding, and he ends up on the slab, which one would be really, really funny because it's Melanie Linsky's husband who just has this really terrible thing happen to him. But it would also sort of justify this idea of, okay, then here is something really bad who may end up happening to somebody else. And it's possible this guy didn't start the fire either, and it's still somebody who may or may not deserve it, but ultimately it would be a really extreme punishment for somebody. And in this case, it might not be strictly for food, which would add that other sort of brutality aspect to it when you're doing something like this, when you don't necessarily need to.
Now, the bigger question here, too, is what happens to Natalie now? Because now that it's come out that she had been keeping from them, that she knew that it very likely wasn't Coach, that she knew that he was alive out there somewhere, that she protected him when he could have been the person that burned down the cabin. She's betrayed them in the eyes of a lot of the other teammates. So for me, I feel like she is no longer going to be the queen. She's no longer going to be in charge. She's going to have that taken away from her. And who's going to be put in next then?
I'm going to make a very terrible comparison, but I'm going to do this anyway. So Natalie has basically had her head of household reign on Big Brother at this point, where she has been put in charge. She has made some moves, but it's turned out her HOH reign has gone very, very terribly. So somebody is going to take the HOH robe away from her. In this case, the Antler Queen. Whatever crown. There we go. I couldn't find the word. They're going to have something else. They're going to have the Yellowjackets version of the competition to crown the new Antler Queen. It may just be a vote or whatever else, but now Natalie's going to be one of these people who goes from being the HOH to being in the doghouse. Like, she's going to be in big trouble now. And, obviously we know she doesn't end up getting killed because she was around in the present to be killed off then. But she's clearly on the ropes when it comes to being in this community now. And that's something that she's going to have to reckon with.
So who then is going to end up with this crown next? Are we going to see it be Lottie, or are we going to see it be Shauna, or is it going to be somebody else?
I'm kind of...
Next, because I think it's going to continue to move around.
I kind of think it's going to be a situation here where it's one of two scenarios related to Shauna. Either Shauna is going to be the next Antler Queen, but it's going to be taken away from her in some way that doesn't feel just or acceptable, and that's going to cause Melissa to go off the deep end. Or it's going to be somebody else like a Lottie, or maybe they go completely out of left field and I don't know, it's a Van, it's a Ty, it's somebody else. And it continues to be passed around to these other people who are not Shauna. And that's going to cause Melissa to go off the deep end. Because I think one way or another, that's kind of what we're building to, where Melissa's going to go more and more crazy and probably going to try to convince Shauna to do more and more terrible things. And I'm sure Shauna is going to do more and more terrible things, but not to the extent that, the likes of Ty or Van or some of these other people would never want to talk to her again. Like, that clearly never goes to that extreme.
Yeah, I think Shauna is going to push everybody around into getting that spot. Melissa will be her little finger whispering in her ear until things get so out of control that everyone in the team is just going to completely turn on them and rip that crown off her head.
Yeah, like we talked about this all the way back at the end of season 2, that I don't think either one of us necessarily thought that Natalie was going to be the Antler Queen for good. It feels like this is more of just an appointed position. If you want to go for a non-reality TV comparison, it's like the championship belt in wrestling, where eventually somebody else is going to end up taking the belt. And this may still happen a number of times before we get to the present.
Yeah, because I feel like it's going to still be Lottie versus Shauna back here too, where Shauna will have the crown for a little while. She'll rule with anger and it'll make everybody really miserable. But Lottie will continue to give everybody money mushrooms and go out into the forest and
Yeah.
bring people in. And eventually everyone will sort of move into that. It'll really divide it, where Shauna will have a smaller group. Lottie will have a much bigger group. We know what happens to her later on in the present, where she ends up having this huge commune of all these people who are there being with her and paying to listen to her. So she is somebody who's going to be able to continue to build influence.
I will say this in totality here, that this is probably my favorite episode of the season. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was perfect, because they're still messing around with things in the present that I don't really understand. But the trial, I think, was exceptional. Having a real jaw dropper at the end of this is great. And also, I want a big pretzel from Central Park now. So thank you guys, Yellowjackets. I love the big soft pretzels.
I'll pass on that. I have celiac disease, so no thank you.
Can I have your big soft pretzel?
You absolutely can.
Thank you very much. But no, that's where we are with Yellowjackets season 3, episode 4. Who do you guys think killed Lottie? Give us your thoughts, your theories on that in the comments, and also hit that subscribe button. Help us get close to 70,000 for Jess's birthday. And if you want to support us further, join our Patreon. That link is in the description below, where we have the Pit on Max and Prime Target on Apple TV Plus that we are covering exclusively. Thank you guys so much. We will see you here next time.